welcome to What's New in Oracle Analytics Cloud this past year. Edward Roski asked me to do a full one-year recap of what's been new in OAC and since last Kscope, and thought, well, let's see how we can do this. And with that, we'll just give a little intro for those of you who do not know who we are. We're Interrel, and our mission is to leave the world a smarter place than we found it. And we do that through our weekly webcasts and through our Play It Forward videos, as well as presenting at conferences and blog posts from the various consultants within Interrel. We're all about relationships, and that, as you can see in our brand, our name is based on the interrelationships. And the way we, this is based on the way in which two or more things or people are connected and affect one another. And so we engage our clients as a relationship. Again, a little bit more information about us. For those of you who do not know, we write books. We have a whole host of books on the Look Smarter Than You Are series. We are partnered with Oracle on in the EPM as well as in BI and analytics space. And the cloud implementations. We have 6 Oracle ACEs, 4 Oracle ACE directors, and I'm one of those, just newly minted ACE director, which was kind of nice to be acknowledged by Oracle. With that, let's move. So, lots happened in the last year and a half-ish, year and 3 months, and we're going to go through these relatively quickly because I think it's a little dense. June 2019, Oracle starts releasing product updates about every 3 months, and we start seeing some new things happening within the data viz space, especially with regards to the S-based components. Pixel Perfect reporting gets a little bit more power to it, or published reporting as it's being called now. The data viz natural language starts to show up, and that's a game changer. In October, 3 months later, we start to see some more enhancements, partly on the import formats, the ability to bring in different kinds of import formats and delimiters, font customizations, custom data action plugins, all ways in which we can interact with our data. Trellising now has 2 y-axes. It really makes everything a whole lot easier to present to the data in your story. January 2020, 3 months later, the butterfly comes into play. Originally, there was a custom plugin written by Gary Edishek from GE, and now Oracle made a butterfly visualization as a first-class item within the views. Map layer, custom map layers became available. Phenomenal ability there to start interacting with map data on your viz. Spacers is nice because what it gives us the ability to move visualizations a little bit apart to give us a little bit more white space, if you want to call it that. Lot more connectors become available, and what we start to see is Oracle starting to really tune into that spatial component. You can see now spatial functions within the data modeling. I'm not going to cover much in Pixel Perfect. In fact, I'm not going to cover anything in Pixel Perfect today, other than the fact is that if you can see, we start to see a lot more of that becoming more like the OBI on-premise and the features and capabilities and connectivity. Oracle, we now get the Oracle Analytics Cloud S-Base goes away. So OAC S-Base is no longer the primary direction. S-Base starts to move to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or Oracle Marketplace. So that was a big announcement in January. May became huge. I mean, look at the numbers of new enhancements that become available here. Waterfalls are now part of the visualization. Again, more happening within the mapping component on the canvas. Calculations render quicker. Flexible, persistent cell spacing on tables and pivots. That alone from a visualization perspective on tabular data, that made it a whole lot easier to work with those elements and really help tell the story from a tabular perspective. Data preparation had a big bump. We see some enhancements on search and replace with the regular expression, or regex. We have the ability to implement now some data machine learning. So these trainer models for outputs for clustering. So in a data flow, we're able to see some clustering happening through that. We start to also get the connectivity to EPM cloud, which is great. Now we can bring an EPM cloud into our projects and into the analyses and dashboards. Again, more connections become available. Microsoft Azure, MySQL, and that's through the remote data gateway. I think again, the list gets bigger and bigger every time, and you can get this information by looking at the what's new. 5/7 July was great. We got to finally see something happening in terms of these performance tiles that were just a number for the most part, and now we're starting to have the ability to put a context around that. So we have the spark lines and charting on that. The canvas becomes more usable. We've got the waterfall bridge reports, and again, more and more of the machine learning becoming part of the analytics cloud experience. In the data preparation, we've got the advanced analytics in the data flow. So we now have things happening at the database in a data flow, and our data set gets stored in the database in some of these advanced analytics, which is awesome. Clustering, unpivoting, just some really, really neat things happening on the data flow piece. It's been constantly in an upgrade, and it actually helps us create better data for our users, for charting, for creating stories, and helping tell that next part of the business. And recently, the September 2020, the 5.8, this one I really, really like, because we start to see some things that have I've been waiting for. In fact, the biggie, I think, is this idea to query the data models, the RPD, remotely via JDBC, and that becomes a game changer from Oracle's perspective, because we're allowing that common enterprise model to be accessible outside of the Oracle ecosystem. Background images, heat maps, headers on all pages. It's just incredible what's the churn rate of new features that Oracle is giving us every 3 months. So how do I fit this all in a 45-minute webcast? And Edward said, make this interesting. And, the first thing I thought of was Sound of Music. These are a few of my favorite things. So, spark lines and tiles and butterfly visualization, waterfall charts and font customizations, custom map layers and EPM cloud data modeling. These are a few of my favorite things. But, these updates just don't lend themselves well for rhyming or even poetic meter. So I had to come up with a different way to make this a little bit more engaging and interesting. So these are the top 10 of my favorite features in the past, feature releases from the past year. So with that, let's get going. So number 10, I think the remote data gateway is a biggie. What this allows is that access to on-prem data sources from the direct connection from DataViz, as well as the RPD. And this, in 5.3, we had access to on-prem databases. And then in 5.8, we got access to on-prem Essbase. There's a YouTube videos from Oracle that are worth watching if you'd like to get more of that. I'm not going to demo or show every one of these new features, so I threw in some of the Oracle Analytics Cloud, Oracle Analytics YouTube channel videos for you all to go check out. The remote data gateway became available to published reporting in the data model section. So your Pixel Perfect or published reports are able to look at on-prem data and access on-prem data from the cloud. So number 9, this one, again, I think this one was a game changer. The ability for us to query the RPD remotely. So the cloud RPD. Long time ago, we were able to query the RPD from OBIE. When we moved to the cloud, we lost that. And now we have the ability to do that with a JDBC and a little bit of extra work. There's some setups that need to be done on both the cloud as well as on where your tools reside. And there's a video there to watch. It'll tell you better than I could right now. In fact, I may be looking to do a blog post on this one because I think it's an important new feature. What this gives is we have the common enterprise model that's happening within the RPD, and our co-workers who may be using different tools such as Tableau or Click or other visualization tools or even other reporting tools can access that same semantic model that was built in being used on dashboards or data viz projects. So this one's big. I think this is I put it at 9, but I'm actually thinking I should have put it a little further down the list and made it, maybe below 5. But it's one of those that I had to split them up, and I think this had to at least be in my top 10. Number 8. Number 8, access to EPM Cloud. So we now have the ability to take and connect data viz or the analyses and dashboards to EPM Cloud. And this one I like because what we can do is, granted they have their own dashboarding, but what we can do is actually take and combine those elements with other analyses on dashboards and have a bigger picture. And I think there are some visualizations that we can do better, though I have not seen the dashboards 2.0 that EPM Cloud just released, and I'd be interested to see how they stack up against what we can do. The nice thing is, in our world, we're able to join different data sources on the same canvas or dashboard. In their world, they cannot. So I could do something with FCC and planning on the same dashboard or same data viz canvas. In the RPD, it's a matter of creating a subject area off of your connection. So I would recommend bringing in the lower view of your EPBCS connection or FCC connection, where you have individual cubes, databases, and make the business model each separate. The one above is problematic and can cause some issues later on filtering. So let's take a look at what does that look like inside planning on a EPM. So we bring in the value, and the one thing that realize when you're working with, this is the RPD, so the subject area, we can see the values and we can see the members of that dimension, is that you need to start actually creating a full point of view across your filters. And what you can't see is that you need to turn off this limit values by auto to limit values by none, and then you can start to get values into your list here for filtering. There is a request out on Cloud Customer Connect for an enhancement that I put out there. So if you'd like to vote on that, we can get more people to push this through to Oracle. So what you're doing is you're basically creating a point of view, much like in Smart View, on the filters before you can even get any data back yet. So here we're going through all of the dimensions and bringing each of those elements in. And you can see we've got our aliases, we've got the different elements within the account structure, metadata related to planning. Here I'm going to filter down to total revenue. And come on. There we go. So we finally got some data. So we'll take this data. Well, let's make a bar chart out of it. And for us, this is nice and easy. I don't have to build a data form like they do in planning. So I'm got switching my graphic around without much difficulty. Hover over, bring in some different information. I want to get down to level 0, so we'll use the leaf indicator. Again, we've got to keep setting this filter to none before we can get it to work. But here now I'm instantly at level 0. And what you can see is that blue line right below the header of the chart is it calculating in the background. So one thing about bar charts is if they're on a vertical horizontal bar, it's sometimes better to sort these from high to low so that we can see easier the distribution as well as the ranking of the data. Otherwise it's up and down, you're going up and down to scan the data to find who's got the most revenue. So with that, data viz on a subject area. So the direct connector came in 5.6 release, which was earlier this summer. And this one's great because now we don't have to have the RPD. The connection is going to be basically your URL to your EPM cloud instance with your tenant ID, and then use the / and then your tenant ID. And then of course a user ID and password. And we get then the list of the cubes that are available on that connection. And I chose again plan 1 on this case. And what we get is no need for that RPD modeling. We have live connections. We have some enhanced metadata that comes through. And in the RPD version, we did not see the generation columns. We only saw the name and parent, so parent-child relationship. Here now we get to see the name and parent, but we also get to see all the generations. And in a ragged hierarchy, this can be kind of problem, because what are we going to do if something doesn't go out all the way to 6 generations? Is it going to show blank? So depending on what you're doing, you may need to play around with your filters to get what you need to see. So here is a DataViz project on a direct connection. So let's take a look at this. Again, all of my filters, I use the set to none. I created the point of view so that we don't have to repeat that process like I did on the DataViz side. The one thing to note here, see the generations, but the other thing is all of these extra aliases, all the language aliases come through. And this part I don't like, that they give us all of the language aliases and no way to get them out. In the RPD, I can eliminate all of the extra language aliases, which is kind of nice because you're managing it from the subject area. So just be aware of your language alias that you're using. It gives me too much clutter. So maybe this is an enhancement. Allow me to pick my alias in the connection so that I don't have all these extra ones showing up. The account description, there's my leaf indicator for my level 0. And then we've got, again, the regular names, Gen 1 through Gen 9 in case on the account here. And again, all that extra metadata that comes through from planning or EPBCS. Here we can, again, change out the graphic without any major work, and I can switch it out to change the pies to the color of each of the products. What's neat now is I can actually duplicate this same viz, and I can change up the one on the right to something else. And this is the part that I like, and we'll talk to this one later, is I can make this a narrative. I can have it tell me about the data. And there we go. It's reading the metadata, it's reading the data, and it's coming up with an insight about it. It's telling me a story rather than me telling the story. It's awesome. So, direct connect on DV to EPM Cloud. Good stuff. Number 7, we get into some of those analytics within the database. And this one is, I think, an excellent new feature. And some YouTube videos to watch on on at least 3 of the 4. These analytics allow us to massage our data flow with machine learning or machine learning capabilities or artificial intelligence within a data flow within the database. So what we have is, I can say we've seen some cases where we have columns of months, and I've got that the month header is the month is the column header of amounts. So January, and we're doing revenue, so it's 100, and then February is 120. Well, I don't want to run it that way. I'd like to use those columns headers as actual metadata, so I can pivot that. I can turn my headers into a dimension called month, and then I'd have one column of data on amount or revenue or whatever it may be. Unpivoting is great because now we have one column of data instead of maybe 12, like a period run across, and it makes it easier to work with in some of the viz. Again, some anomaly detection. Sampling the data allows us to, if we have a huge data set on the data warehouse, we can take and bring down, only work with maybe 10% of it, and it does a random sampling, and it gives us a good enough sampling so that we can extrapolate to the larger data set for reporting or storytelling. Number 6 is more in the ML space, and this is really starting to help us work with things that, say, the data scientists already had. We only have a couple machine learning components in Oracle Analytics Cloud normal Canvas project. What this does is it allows a data scientist to register or to use models and provide them off to, say, the desktop analyst, and we can now register these models to our project or into the Oracle Analytics Cloud that were created by a data scientist. And then we can use them in our data flows, or we can use them on our canvases or projects. So maybe you have a data scientist who has a different clustering algorithm. This allows us that ability for them to give you that in the data warehouse, and then, or your Oracle database, and then you can use it in your projects. So again, use a consistency of definition and again, storytelling. And we'd like to thank Oracle for this slide. Here then is that model either being used in a data flow, or we could use it on the canvas. One of the caveats on this is that the machine learning model and the data have to reside in the same database. The power of this is that it function ships that model's execution and keeps it all in the database. And then the resulting data set is a new table in your database with the model applied to it. So we get the power of all that back-end processing happening at the database instead of out at the browser client, and then you can digest that output, that resulting data set in your own viz. So number 5, copy and paste. And this one, people think, oh, copy and paste, that anybody can do copy and paste, but this became big when we've already done, copy a view within a canvas, duplicate the view, and I've got one, or I go edit and copy and then paste that view on the same canvas. Then we were able to move them across canvases. So I've got canvas 1, I got a nice map, I want to do the same map on canvas 2, copy, paste it onto the next canvas. But then we got copy the view across projects. That was awesome. So now I have a view in one project. I think it's awesome. I want to share it in another project and actually maybe change the data source, which is a neat feature. Again, maybe one of those I should have put in here, but I think change the data source was outside of the 1-year window. But I think the big one is I can copy a whole canvas to another project. And the last 2, views across projects and Canvas across projects actually take the data with it and or the connection with it. So I could be in a project on one data source, copy that view or Canvas into another project, and it brings the connection and it brings the data and everything else along with it. That is awesome. So let's take a look at how that looks. We've got a nice recorded video here. Learned a long time. Don't go live if you can help it. So I've got this big heat map, right? This grid heat map. I'm going to copy this visualization. I'm on Canvas 3, and I'm going to go to a different project, right? So that was off of my Superstore sales. And now I'm going into a different project, which is using the sample order, and I can go onto a new Canvas page and paste that visualization. And you will see down at the bottom, it brought in my sample sales for the US as a new viz. All right. So now I'm on my sample sales, my sample order lines. Let's get a graphic chart here. There we go. So I have this one, and I want to copy this whole Canvas sample order lines back over to where my sample sales US is. Paste the Canvas. You see down at the bottom, right click, paste Canvas, and you can see it's bringing the data back and the filters from what was set up. So now I've got a completely different data set in this Canvas from the original design. And if I like this design, I could actually right click on that data source in the tree on the left side here and say change data source, and I can pick it to a different data source. It keeps all the styles and all the configs like they are, and all I need to do then is align the dimensions and members, attributes, measures from that one data source into what I've already aligned for this data source. So it's pretty powerful. The copy and paste, you start to have consistent designs that you can move through your project. So you have the ability to use certain parts of stories in different projects. It's nice. And quite frankly, it can save on a lot of development time and layout time. So let's see, we've got number 4. Number four is data actions. And it's kind of an understated, but it has so much power. Data actions, we already started when OAC came out. We had the going to a published event and URL navigation. But some of the new ones, these new analytic links, this one came out recently. And this analytic link, there's again, YouTube video on data actions. Take a look at it. You can see more about how it's working. But just, I wanted to give a little shout out to it. These data actions, we can do it on a dimension or a member in the data. So we link that and would execute whenever we click on it. What's my target? A different project? The same project? Maybe. And what am I doing? Am I going and am I passing the values into context? So if I'm on a data action, I've got the amount on a pivot, and my left side is months, right? And my columns are products. And I click on the data point, I can use the months and the product at that intersection to use as filters on a target. That is so cool. Just cool. We could do it in OB all the time. We do an action link, and we would it would take the reference points of the columns and rows and any dimensions, and you could use it as a filter to the next one. The other one new also is the ability to do some API calls. And this one I need to dig into some more, because I think this one has some great potential for the projects to help drive other actions, get you into something else. Again, the whole idea of the data visualization is to facilitate further inquiry or to take action on what you've seen. So we see something that's out of sync with our KPI, it's too low or too high, we could click on on that action and go into maybe the ERP system or whatever to get further detail or to make some changes or further inquiry downstream. API, good one. The analytic links, really good. So, number three. Number three, I have always liked maps. Don't know what it is about maps and in analytics, but I love maps and analytics. I think if anything has a geography component to it, you should think about trying to do something with a map to help tell that story. If I told you the, zip codes throughout the Alabama and Louisiana and the Gulf that are being ravaged by the hurricane, you'd have a hard time figuring out where it was, or maybe the counties. But if I put a map up and I show you the path of that hurricane and the damage or potential damage, or maybe if you're in the insurance, what's your possible payout of premiums or claims, that component, maps help tell that story. The neat thing though is that OAC allows for custom maps and custom map layers. So with that, I've got a grid, right? I've got some regional sales of avocados, right? In my average price, I've got my total volume and total number of bags sold. And I'd like to do a custom map on this. But most maps that we have are just by state. And you don't want to have to go find your GIS guy or a map specialist to say, oh, can you draw me regions based on these states, and you might, and get me a map layer so that I can interact with it in my, and export it as a JSON so that I can import it into OAC so I can use it as a map layer. And oh, by the way, I need these columns to be my matching. Yeah, good luck with that. However, we can take this image, make it a JPEG, upload it as a custom background into OAC. And then once it's in there, we come down here on the, if you can see down in the lower portion here, is we create a map layer. So I've got a background, and now I'm going to create a map layer. And this map layer, let's take a look. We're going to draw our own boundaries. This is awesome. Spatial Studio doesn't even do this yet. And that's an Oracle Spatial product. It's getting there, but we got it before they did, which is kind of cool. So we can create a custom map layer by drawing little dots, drawing our polygon around the regions that we, or states that we want. I don't have to even follow the state lines. I could cut right through, say, middle of a state, and you find a GIS guy who could give you based on, oh, they would do it based on maybe zip codes or counties and say these counties are this side of the state, these are in this one. And quite frankly, when you're doing something at this level, you don't need to be that particular because you're at the high level, just want to maybe give your regional sales. So there we go. I've got a polygon, and this polygon is going to be called Great Lakes. And I control this because I wanted it to match my data on that table. All right. So now I've got my polygon, I've drawn that map, and I can start to create another polygon, draw it around. But we're going to save that because that's a little time consuming. But there you go. That's a Great Lakes polygon. And then we go to, we now have all of the polygons drawn. So this took me maybe 5-10 minutes of clicking and making polygons and giving them the names to match my regions. And the neat thing about this is, okay, say I need to include Minnesota as part of my, and I say that like I'm in Wisconsin, Minnesota as one of those, as part of the Great Lakes. Well, I can come in here and reapply my boundary lines to take Minnesota out of my plains definition and add it into, by just replugging and drawing and dragging out these dots, with the edit mode, I can now include Minnesota as part of the Great Lakes, which is cool because I did not have to go back to a GIS guy to say, oh, you know, I screwed up. I should have had this state in here. And he would say, or she would say, yeah, that'll be a little while. Where you can just go click, 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 and you've got yourself a map. So what does this all look like? Well, here we go. There's my avocado at regional. And let's see what we can do with this. So we're going to grab we're going to create a pivot table right now just to get us a starting point. So I'm going to bring in my region on rows and my average price, my total volume, and my total bags. And there we go. There's that grid that we were showing at the beginning. So this is cool. I just right click on and change out the viz. And we say, I'm going to map. And guess what? It knows what to do with it. Because we had a data set with names and it recognized it and it was able to pull it in. So if we go down to the bottom, and this one just did a bubbles over the regions. If we hovered on that, we could have seen that. But because we had it in there, the metadata, it linked, it knew what to do. But that, when we bring in the state or the region, it would have just left it as, if we picked the best visualization, it wouldn't know to make a map. It would have just done a table. But now we can do this, assign a location, right? So this is important. We can assign location details. I'm going to back this up a minute here. So you see that location details on a geographic element. So whenever this element gets selected, it's going to automatically go to map mode. And we're assigning it location details. We're assigning it then to what map layer. This is that US map layer regions that we created. It's telling me I've got 100% match on all of my data. There's nothing falling out, which is nice. And then we apply that to our data and we get into the viz mode. And now I just pick region and total bags, tell it to pick a visualization. Yeah, I could do the map, but if I say pick best, or I just drag these into the canvas, pick best or drag them into the canvas, it automatically applies it to a map because we had the region tied as a location type element, and it will automatically go as a map layer, which is so, I think, neat. The ability to create your own custom regions for telling your data story is great. And it doesn't need to be a geographic like a map. It could be a floor plan of a store, a floor plan of an office. Maybe, well, you've seen the motorcycle one that Philippe Leon put out, but it's to your imagination. So that's, I think really a powerful, great new feature. Number two are new visualization options. I really like these, at least these three. There's a lot more that have come out. The spark lines on performance tiles, this is good stuff. If you've read the book, The Big Book of Dashboards by Steve Wexler, and I forget who the other gentleman's name that put that out, he talks about things called bands, big blank numbers. Okay, you figured that one out. But I, you know, a performance tile, a tile alone, just with a number, doesn't give me enough context. It doesn't tell me, am I up or down from a previous month or compared to something else. And what this does is it gives me a better picture of it. It gives context to that value. So it's kind of a little micro chart below the number. Butterfly charts. These are big. Some people like scatter plots over butterfly charts. I tend to be one of those. Butterfly charts, I think for some folks are easier to read. And we'll take a look at that one. The bridge or waterfall charts. This one is nice. It's great to have a waterfall chart in our data viz project because we'd like to see what's contributing to from a starting value to an ending value. What is our what's happened in that period of time. So, and of course, many, many more. So let's take a look at spark lines on tiles. So we've got a grid. We've got several years worth of data. We've got it by state. We got some this is honeybee production. So we've got yield per colony, and here's my performance tiles. And I can't tell, am I up or down from last year? This is an average value on each of these tiles. But if I switch over to the spark lines, I can see. So there's my average, and then I can see what my average value per year. Am I up or am I down? So you can start to see production kind of does a little spiking up, and we can switch out. If we don't want to do time, we can maybe just do some categories. And let's take a look at the chart, the production by state. Now, this is where I wish Oracle would have done, is given me the hover over what that bar means. But at least you see which one's the highest for that period of time. I'm going to put it back to year, and here I can see again in order. My highest year and my lowest year are a different color than the rest of them. And then I can show a reference line, which is an average, which is kind of cool. Again, a little bit of machine learning that went into that. And it just gives us a more context. How many more months are above or below the average? Did we have some that really offset that? Butterfly charts. So butterfly charts, and this one is actually off of planning data. So I use one of my planning projects, and I've got operating expenses and revenues. And you can see down on the left side, and I'll cover this in the demo as it records, I created two calculations. Remembering that a butterfly chart wants to work on two measures, one on the left, one on the right. And in the world of EPM, we only have one data point. So how do you do that in planning or FCC? We actually take and we use a function called filter on using. And in here, you can see I'm filtering on the value using account equal to my revenues. So that's my revenue amount. And then my calculation for op expenses is filtered on value using my operating expenses. So now I should see revenue and on the right and operating expenses on the left, and we start to bring in a measure, or excuse me, a dimension to see how are we spreading this information or this data across, and you can see the blue line is calculating. So it's taking a little bit to render this. And we can see now, based on my level 0 indicator of cost centers, where my revenue was high versus high operating expenses. And the thing is, we're using a standard or a consistent axes on the left side and the right side. And we could actually go in, and I don't know, I probably did not record that. We could actually change the scale of the left side versus the right side. But in this case, I want them the same because I want to see how big it is different. The downside about butterfly charts is that if you're a negative number, I can't float that to the other side of the line. So we're only seeing positive numbers in this. So that's a downside of butterfly charts. Whereas a scatter plot, I don't have to limit myself to a zero axis. And the bridge waterfall. So this is again one of those great ones to bring into EPM. Again, I'm still using my EPBCS connection planning, a waterfall looking at my years. What's my gain in revenues? So I'm using one measure, the value dimension or value member, and the years as my x-axis. And let's take a look at this. So we've got a waterfall, nice and simple waterfall. Again, remember that you had to create all your filters at the top. So I'm going to bring in, again, my cost center. And I've got the leaf indicator turned off yet. We'll see this having to flip this on in a minute because I'm picking up the whole level of the hierarchy of cost center, and this one doesn't help me any. So let's turn on the leaf indicator so I'm at level 0, and I can see throughout the year, you can see across the bottom FY15, and then we switch to FY16, and the cost centers, are they adding or subtracting from that? So what's better is if I take this and move cost center to detail, now we're in a bridge report, a bridge waterfall. So we're going up and down within the year on cost center. A little easier to read than the previous one. And then we can again put in some reference lines, some statistics. What's the average? Basically, the values here. It became an average down here. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can do it. And then some filters if we wanted to do some changes of filters. And again, some of the formatting and tool tips and labeling. So, last but not least, and I think probably one of the biggest and greatest enhancements into OAC in this last year is, number one, natural language generation. This is groundbreaking. This ability for the analytics to tell the story to you, than you having to look at the chart and interpret it. It's actually doing it for you. So there are 3 areas in which natural language generation is being used. The explain feature that's available in Oracle Analytics Cloud, Oracle Analytics Server, and Oracle Analytics Desktop. The insights feature, if you haven't used the Synopsys app on your phone, the iPhone or the Android, there's a app in the store that's available for free called Synopsys. You can upload a spreadsheet into the app, and it'll do all kinds of neat analytic views for you, and it'll give insights on it, on the data, which is really neat. And then finally, the narrative views that were extended into Oracle Analytics Cloud. So let's take a look at the Oracle Analytics Cloud narrative view. So we've got my revenue project, and I'm going to change it up a bit. I'm going to add a narrative view to my analytic. And I showed it a little bit before on the EPBCS connection. This one's on some data from the warehouse, a database, my sample light. And we can start to see an interpretation of my data, revenue by month. And I can change it from a breakout to trend. And it's telling me more and more about that data. And what's neat is I can do it based on 2 attributes, right? So there's my trend, overall trend, and then breakdown by company, trending the data. And it's giving me an interpretation of the data. What's high, what's low, and each of the companies, how are they doing, right? If I switch the order, then it changes the narrative. So now I got to break down by month because the month is now at the bottom, is the primary, right? The one thing about these viz is that, again, only 2 dimensions or 2 attributes and 1 fact, or 2 facts and 1 attribute. That's how that will work. So with that, wow, my top 10 of the newest features in Oracle Analytics Cloud from this last year. I think there's some great stuff on the roadmap, and there were so many other ones that were just itching to be in my top 10 list. I'd be interested to hear from you what you think are your top 10 of new features into Oracle Analytics Cloud. And quite frankly, it is some really neat things coming ahead of time. So let's see, can you clarify when you have time, the relationship with Oracle Analytics Cloud and Oracle Essbase? We are considering going to OAC and currently use Essbase. I did not completely follow what you meant when you covered it. So Oracle Analytics Cloud, when it came out, had two flavors. There was Oracle Analytics Cloud S-Base and Oracle Analytics, and it was basically you had a standard edition, a data lake edition, and an enterprise edition or something like that. And S-Base was in the data lake edition, and Oracle took S-Base out of the Oracle Analytics Cloud architecture and put it into its own product and became part of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure or Oracle Marketplace, so S-Base on the Marketplace. So you basically moved away from the autonomous S-Base, as it was called, and back into your own managed version of the server, S-Base on the cloud. So I'm hoping that's answering your question, but it basically in January, Oracle said our direction for S-Base is to sever it from Oracle Analytics Cloud as a package and make it its own product with its own infrastructure and your ability to then manage it, the resources, and get into the back end like you can with S-Base on-prem. You can go with the configs and you can SSH into some of the operating system pieces and logs and everything else. When it was part of OAC, it was Oracle managed, it was autonomous. You couldn't see anything on S-Base. You couldn't reboot it. You had to have them reboot it. You couldn't see the logs, and it was kind of cumbersome. But OAC, BI, and Data Viz can connect to S-Base on-prem through the remote data connector, or it can connect to S-Base on the cloud in the marketplace. And for those people who are still on OAC autonomous S-Base, it can connect to that as well. So we can embed it into or connect to it through a Data Viz project, or we can connect to it through the RPD. So I'm hoping that answered your question. And we had one other person asking about slides, and yes, I think our recorded demo or recorded of this session will be available. And with that, we are at 7 minutes to the hour. I will stay on for another minute for any other questions. And if you don't have any, I know people are starting to disconnect. Well, I'll wrap up. We have some upcoming webcasts. We have the What's New in FCC next week. We have our retail virtual conference next week on the 24th. And then on the 30th of September, we have the What's New in Narrative Reporting. Some great webcasts coming up. Please come and visit and watch and learn. And if you see something and learn something, pass it on. With that, I'd like to also recommend our Hyperion Solutions Conference 2020. I was at the last Hyperion Solutions Conference back, geez, what was it, 2007 in Orlando. Wow, such a long time ago. And it's great to see that Edward is bringing this back into the fold, and we're having some retro presentations, some awesome stuff coming up in that. Well over 500 attendees, some great sessions. Take a look, epm.bi/Hyperion to register and attend. It is free. So it's 3 days of great content, 3 or 4 days of great content, 19, 20, 21, 4 days, yeah. And we look forward to seeing you there. And with that, I have no more questions. I appreciate your time. Have a great day, and thank you.